Okay, so we're on part 3 of our mini-series on objection handling. We've talked through various other objections, but today what I want to do is I want to tackle that objection. Comes in the form of, I'm happy with my current supplier, or I'm happy with the way that we're doing things at the moment. It's a very common objection that you get, particularly if you're involved in telephone selling. You introduce yourself to the prospect, you tell them a little bit about what it is you provide or what you're offering, and you get an immediate, safe response from them, I'm happy with what we're doing at the moment. Well, when you get that objection of, I'm happy with what we're doing at the moment, the most common and probably the easiest way for a salesperson to respond is to start to question and challenge, well, okay, what is it you're doing at the moment? What are you using? Who is the supplier that you're using at the moment? Well, as soon as you start to challenge them in that way, what you often find is that people start to get defensive and the defense barriers come up. And that's one thing that you really need to avoid, particularly in cold calling. You don't want the barriers to come up. And what you may find, those of you that have had that objection, when you start to challenge it and say, well, who are you using at the moment? A lot of people will respond by saying, well, I'm not prepared to tell you that. But what I am prepared to tell you is I am happy with who we're using at the moment. So thank you, goodbye. And they hang up the phone. What we've got to make sure is that we manage to engage them without getting their defenses up. The easiest way to approach this is effectively to tell your prospect that you're not about to hard sell them. And the way that I do that would be to, again, is to empathize, as we've been saying in the previous sessions. Say, okay, look, I completely understand. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I'm certainly not going to expect that you're going to change your supplier or change the way that you're doing things based purely on this call. By using that statement, look, I'm not expecting that you're going to change based purely on this call, what you find is the prospect is likely to instantly relax because suddenly they realize, okay, this person is not going to hard sell me. And you know what? We're not going to hard sell them, but what we are going to do is we're going to present something in a fairly reasoned way. We're going to follow it up by a following statement, and we're going to say, and I appreciate that at the end of the day, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I know that the most important thing for you is to make sure that you've got the right supplier in place that's providing the right quality at the right price, isn't it? Now, it's almost a rhetorical question because we know the answer is going to be yes. And okay, occasionally you may get people that will respond by saying, well, it's not just about price and quality, and they have other things that are important to them. Well, that's great, because if they do respond by saying, well, it's not about this, it's about X or Y, we've already engaged them in the conversation. Now all we need to do is be clever about the other questions and the following questions we ask, and before we know it, that customer who said they were happy with their current supplier has already engaged you in a conversation and is allowing you to have that conversation with them. But what we're really looking for in that context is we want them to give us that positive response. And sometimes what you'll find is the prospect may even give you a rather annoyed response and say, well, of course that's what's important. However they respond is not important, because the important thing here is that as soon as they have responded, they're almost inviting you to continue the conversation. Unless, of course, as it does happen, they've already hung up the phone. But, there's no golden bullet when it comes to objection handling, is there? So hopefully we're going to get that positive response and say, well, of course, that's important. And the next thing is to present a fairly reasoned approach. And the way that I've done this in the past is to say, look, all I'm asking for, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, is just that you give me an opportunity to talk through the products, the solutions that we sell, that we provide, and demonstrate the value that we could potentially offer to what you're doing at the moment. Even if you make the decision that our solution is not for you, worst case scenario, at least you've managed to make a comparison and you're going to know that the solution that you've got in place at the moment really is the right solution for you. And then if you're really ballsy at the end of it, you can add into that, what have you got to lose? Come on, Mr. Customer, Mr. Mrs. Customer, all I'm asking for is just for you to give me a certain amount of your time just for me to talk through the value that our potential solution could offer for you. What have you got to lose? So remember, it's about presenting things in a fairly reasoned way. It's about taking a step back. It's about not being too in your face. It's about making sure that the barriers don't come up. So just to recap, a response could be, okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Customer. I appreciate that, Mrs. Customer. You know what? I'm certainly not expecting that you're going to make a change based purely on this phone call. However, at the end of the day, I'm sure the most important thing for you, the right supplier in place, giving you the best solution at the best price, isn't it? So all I'm asking is that you give me an opportunity just to demonstrate the value we could potentially add to what you're doing at the moment. At least that way you've got something to compare your current supplier with, haven't you? Yeah, what have you got to lose? Presenting it in that fairly reasoned way is going to get you a lot further than saying, well, what have you got in place at the moment? Well, who are you using at the moment? And suddenly starting to try and sell against what they've got in place. Obviously, what you need to make sure is that when they get to that point and they say, okay, well, fine, okay, let's hear what you've got to say. What you're not going to do is jump in with your sales pitch. Because then what you've got to do is take a step back and say, great, so all I need to do then is I have a few qualifying questions that I want to ask just to clarify what you're doing at the moment, how you're going about doing it, just so I can make sure that what I tell you about our product and solution is actually going to be relevant to the way that you're doing things at the moment. So let me just ask you a few questions. And now you're into the conversation where you're asking them questions and they've actually given you permission to ask the questions. They've engaged in the conversation and they're giving you the information you now need to be able to present your product, your solution in the best light.